sound for color, just share. Okay. Everyone right there. Okay. So can everyone see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we've just opened DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve is a free program, but it's very, very powerful in terms of color grading and even just regular editing here. The first thing you'll notice is that this is a multi-purpose suite in which we can edit, we can do effects in the Fusion tab, we can do color, we can work on sound in the Fairlight tab, and then finally we have our exporting tab. Today we're going to be focusing on the media tab, edit tab, and color tab. These are going to be the three tabs that you'll use the most if you're specifically focusing on color grading, and of course delivery tab, because in most cases colorists have the job to have the right to final export. So I've loaded in some examples here, similar to Premiere and Final Cut. You just load in your footage like you normally would, and after you got it loaded up, you create timelines within there, and you can simply do that by coming to your edit tab and dropping in whatever footage from whatever folder. I've created 3 different timelines here, one for MOV or ProRes footage, one for R3D files or red footage, and a third timeline for straight out of camera H.264 footage. Okay. So to find all this information, it's kind of important. So you would basically come to your folders here, select your clip, make sure your metadata tab up in the top right here is open so you could see what kind of footage you're working with. Right here, you can see this is H.264 codec file at 25 FPS in 1920 by 1080. Now, the only thing for colorists that's super important is the codec that it's in. This is an H.264 file, meaning it's most likely going to be 8-bit color depth, which we can see down here in the clip details right after frames, bit depth 8. And just as a comparison, I can go to our red footage and we can see we have a bit depth of 16 because we are working in R3D raw files. And what this means is that number, 8-bit, 16-bit, 10-bit, whatever, that just represents how much you can push and pull your footage and to what degree. For like, so on the red footage, I can push and pull all the colors and all the brightness and stuff way further than I can this 8-bit. Okay. And if we go to these footage here, it's at 10 bits. So this is going to give us a little bit more than 8. So just remember, the higher bit depth, the more you're going to be able to push and pull and manipulate your footage. So once we're in our timeline and we've gone ahead and put our footage into a sequence, we're just going to pretend like this is a picture locked cut right here. Okay, I have 3 examples. I'm going to try and show you guys some cool things you can do. So we have this clip right here. Yeah, really cool. And then I have 2 of the same clip because I also am going to show you a technique that we can do for color matching and color balancing to the from shot to shot, so your whole project looks the same. Okay, so once we have this picture lock cut, again, we're just going to pretend. Okay, we're going to go over to our color tab, and this is where we see all this stuff. Now, does anyone know where we can even get started in this tab? Anyone at all? No? Okay.
I would assume our wheels and stuff we could adjust, right, to bring up well, the gain's going to be the level of light value that's in the thing. Gamma is going to be like
Right.
color shift. All
Okay.
these
So
wheels over there, right?
yeah, we can start over here. Sure. So if you were
But
to
don't let me
manipulate,
lead you. Is that where we would start?
this is what I'm getting to.
Okay, great. Oh,
Okay, so we can come straight over here and try to manipulate the footage, but as I do so, we notice that nothing is happening. Nothing at all is happening to our footage. I can turn the gain and set it all the way to purple, but nothing's happening to our footage. The reason why nothing's happening to our footage is because we are we don't have any nodes on the screen here. See in this big blank area, if you're not seeing it, you may need to toggle the top right, a button that says nodes, toggle off, toggle on. So this big blank area here, the nodes is what tells the footage what to do. So to get us started, we can right click, add node, and hit corrector. So this is going to give us our first node here. And I'm going to go and manipulate the gain wheel again. Again, nothing's happening. Why is that? Well, it's because none of these things are linked. We need to link the green parts, the beginning and end of our tree. This is the start of our tree. This is going to be our first node. And now if I go to gain and I bring it all the way to purple, it's going to bring it purple, green. We can manipulate which way we want, go on our offset. Cool. But it's usually the case, and I'm going to teach you guys today, the safest way of going about these nodes is to always think in layers. So this first node is going to be our start off layer. I'm going to right click and where is it? Where's the naming? Node label. Okay, you can right click and hit node label, and then that enables you to name the node. So I'm going to call this I'm going to call this our base. Okay, this is our where we start off. Okay, and so generally I leave this unedited, untouched, and to really make sure, I'm going to right click and hit reset node grade. That will reset everything back to default. And the next step in our process is we're going to add a second node. No, we're not going to delete a link. We're going to add a second node, and we're going to add another corrector here. And again, I'm going to just connect these by dragging it over the line. Okay, so that's now connected. And while this node is selected, the second one, I'm going to name this EXP. Does anyone have a guess as to what EXP stands for?
Expanded.
Close. EXP stands for exposure. So in our step-by-step process of nodes, we're always going to start with the exposure. So to really nail down exposure, I'm going to change my scopes here with this drop-down arrow, and I'm going to go to waveforms. Now, this can be pretty intimidating at first to get into reading these scopes, waveforms, parades, or whatever you are used to seeing. But these give you like guidelines and like numerical values as to what your footage is in terms of brightness and all that stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do in our exposure tab is I'm going to make sure I'm in my primary wheels. This is going to be the first dot right here. So there's multiple tabs. You're going to go over to the third one, into the color wheels, and you're going to make sure you're on this first tab here. And I have two more, brings me bars and then log wheels. So, but we're going to start off in the primary. So to manipulate each one, let's say I don't want everything up here. I want things to be hovering around 768 or 640. I'm going to come to my offset, and instead of manipulating the wheel right here, I'm going to come to this bar right underneath these values here. I'm going to just drag it left and right. And as you can see on our waveforms, it brings it up and down. Okay. So I'm going to just bring that down until everything is just lowered, and you could see what that's doing to our footage. And we're just like, wait, that's a little too dark. So what I can do from here is the next step after you get your offset to where you want it, to where it looks all right. You come to your lift, and same thing. You come to this wheel kind of right under the colors, and I swing it to the right, and that'll bring all the shadows up. And generally you want to keep everything right at 0, or else you'll be clipping colors, or you can just do it by eye and see whatever looks natural. So I'm going to bring that big to you, big again. So again, I'm going to manipulate the offset here. Think of this as some sort of brightness as an overall mover, right? And lift specifically deals with bringing up shadows and bringing down shadows. So I'm going to just get this to right about 0 at a level that looks pretty natural. Okay, that looks pretty good. And
Brennan, I have a
after,
question.
yes.
Why don't we do everything just with our eyes? I mean, we look at everything. Why don't I? Why am I even looking at the scopes?
So the reason why we pay attention to our scopes and not necessarily the preview footage here is because scopes can give you a reliable way to tell whether your footage is within legal limits or legal ranges. And what that is a general consensus of every monitor that this can be displayed on. These are like the rules of which they can be at. So for example, that was worded a little difficult. So I'm going to show you an example here. So if I bring my offset and I have all the colors and all the range peaking above 768, then those colors, all that information will most likely be lost due to the display that your video is going to be played on. Same thing with the shadows here. If I go in the lift and I bring that all the way down past 0, obviously it doesn't look as good in our preview, but that also means that on most displays, it will not, all that information will also be lost. This is why we like to stay within certain ranges and get it to the range and then do it by eye to see what looks natural to you on your monitor, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to bring this back down, hovering 768. That's about the safe zone from 0 to 768. That's the safe zone for most displays. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just going to add on that too. Everyone's display might be color calibrated differently. So the scopes are really the only reliable way to know that your project will be viewed the same no matter where it's projected. If it's a, a light bulb projector, if it's somebody's watching it on their phone, and by you said legal, the scopes show us the legal view, but it's like the acceptable view. It's the view that, like, won't, the whites and the blacks won't be crushed on a different, maybe poorer screen. Basically there is a big difference when you watch something on your phone or you watch something on a big 50-inch television, and it could be different from every single television in your house because your TV could be calibrated for, when you look at the defaults, televisions can be calibrated for sporting events, can be cinema, et cetera, et cetera. And even different brands can give you different temperatures as far as like your displays. And even notable, windows, the light that's coming in can affect how things are viewed. So paying attention to the scopes are really important. It's just like audio, where you're paying attention to your audio meters because maybe it sounds good, but it's clipping a whole bunch. It's easier to be like, well, this looked good on my my little laptop screen, but when I projected it all big, I didn't really notice all the noise that's in my dark scenes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tim. That was a much
Thank
better
you.
explanation. Okay, so we've done our work in our primary wheels here, and we've got our scopes to where sitting at about where it looks good, and it looks good in frame here. Typically, you might not get it on the first try just in these primary wheels. So what we can do is head over to the third tab right here to our log wheels, and this gives us more finite control over certain aspects. Think of the primary wheels like a regular knife as you're cutting away, and the log wheels are more like a scalpel. Okay. Um, so what I mean here is I could specifically target the shadows, and I could drag this bar left and right, and you can see that it specifically brings up and down the shadows here. And for even more finite control, if you have a scroll wheel, you can hover over it too and scroll up and down, and it'll go up and down in smaller increments. And this is about where we like it here. So this is pretty much wrapped up for the exposure. So again, so long as it's within this range of 768 to 0, you should be good to go on multiple displays. And we can go ahead and move on to our next node. So instead of right-clicking add node and adding a corrector node, what we can do is hit Alt and S, and that will just give us a new corrector node right here. And I could just do that forever, but we're not going to, not yet. This one is going to be our white balancing node. Now for our white balancing, we want to switch scopes over to our parade scopes, and this will give us the red, green, and blue values of what's going on here. And with this node selected, we tend to manipulate more so the temperature and tint of the footage, and that is very easily located here. On the previous update, you might be working off the previous update of Resolve, but it was at the bottom underneath your wheels, and you would have to switch pages. There would be a 1 and a 2 right about in this area, and that's how you switch pages to see temperature and tint. But on the new update, they're just located right up here, really easy to find, and it doesn't matter which tab we're in terms of bars or log wheels or primary wheels. We can just come in here and manipulate the temperature. So as you can see here, we have a lot more red and green than blue here. And what we can do is take our tint and drag it to the left, and that'll even it out a lot more. What you're looking for here on the scopes is that the peaks of each color is about even, or as even as you can get it. And you may not see a whole lot of difference in our preview footage, or in our preview window, sorry. But it makes all the difference when you try it, when we get to the color grading node. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so this is about even in terms of red and blue. And as you can see, green kind of looks a little low, it might be higher than red here. So we can come to our tint, which is our green versus magenta, and temperature is our blue versus orange, right? So I'm going to come in our tint as well and manipulate it so that all the peaks of these waves look about the same. And again, we may not see a big difference here. That may be due to the footage, but this will make all the difference in the world when we try to go for a grade. Okay, and this is about good in terms of white balancing. That's what we try to do. We mainly just make sure our colors are, our red, green, and blue values are pretty much even. If you're not getting the values that you want, or they're not balancing as prettily as one might like, you can come to our second tab here in the bars, and we can come to gamma. And again, if you have a scroll wheel, you can just hover over each one and scroll up and down. For example, I think red might be a little high, so I'm just going to scroll down on red, and you can see it bump down. I'm going to do it a little more dramatic, right? Down, scroll up, just like that. And you can do this with the gamma to make sure that everything's even. And gamma refers to the overall luminance of the entire screen, not any specific value. It's just like the overall, like imagine if there was like a transparent fill over your footage, it would affect that. That's the best way I can describe it. So that's about it in terms of white balancing our footage here in the white balancing node. Everything looks about even on our parade scale here. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next node? Okay.
Is this also like, is this the process across the board for all exposure? Or wait, sorry, I'm gonna turn in my chair. It's kind of squeaky. Squeaky. Yeah, so like if we're doing this in what am I trying to say, in like Premiere, would that also be how we do it, like using these nodes and stuff, or is it like is this
So
just for
nodes
the
is actually
workstation
pretty specific to DaVinci as of right now. The way it works in Premiere is I believe it applies as sort of an effect, but you can manipulate the same values and view the same sort of scopes in the same way and get it to these values as well.
We'll, after Rhenen shows us this, we will go over it in Premiere. Probably not quite as detailed as Rhenen, because Rhenen's an expert in this, and I'm just I'm learning Resolve here. But in DaVinci, I can totally show you where we find our scopes and all of these assets. And if we're familiar with Premiere, we know that effect control is, at least on my setup, is the window in the upper left. And you can like affect, the scale, opacity, everything. Any effect you put in has effect control there. And any of our color correction tools that we use end up there, and you can change the controls there. Also, it has a built-in coloring system called Lumetri, which I'll also show you how to use that as well. So,
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, cool. So before we move on to the next sort of node, I just want to cover from the start again. So I'm going to deactivate these nodes here. And the way I did that was I would click on each one and hit Control D or Command D, I believe, on Mac for Mac users. So I'm going to just deactivate those for now. We started with our base again. Nothing going on here. This is just a node to tell our footage like, hey, this is where we start. Okay. Then we went into our exposure and we exposed it. Again, if we go to our waveforms, we've exposed it to a very specific range. Okay. Just above 0 and hovering at about 768, 640, 96. It varies, and it also depends on certain tastes and exactly what you're grading for. But we'll get into that later if you do have questions about that. And then the next node we had was white balancing. And as you can see, this is without white balancing. With white balancing, I just brought up the blues, turned down the reds, and made sure everything was even across the board for white balance. And now we end up with this sort of image. This is with no grade done. This is just exposed properly, quote unquote, and properly white balanced, quote unquote. It's all up to how it's all up to what needs a project might have. But overall, this would be my first 3 steps into color grading a project. Okay. So after white balance, the next step, I'm going to hit Alt S for a new node, or Command S for Mac users. And this is going to be our saturation slash mid-tone detail. So saturation, we all might be familiar what saturation is, and that can be located anywhere, again, in any of these 3 tabs here, and right here, right under here, SAT. So what I've discovered through color grading some footage is that the safe bet is to push it up to 75 saturation and see how it looks. And depending on taste, you can turn it down, or if it needs more, you could turn it up to 100, but that might be a little overkill for this footage here. Again, this was our H.264 footage, I believe. If I click on the eye icon in the far right here, it'll tell me exactly. Yep, codec H.264. And to get back to our scopes, I just hit this little wavy icon here. And then the one to the left of that is your keyframes, and we'll get into keyframes in a little bit. But yeah, so around 75, that's what it looks like there. I'm actually going to turn it down. Let's try 65. Okay, that looks pretty good. It's a little bit muted, but I can show you a part of one of the tricks I was going to show you for this. We'll cover about how to target specific areas and bring up the color. Okay, and to go full screen and not full screen, I'm just hitting this this icon here in the top right of our preview. Okay, and so that covers our saturation, and now we need midtone detail, and that can be found on DaVinci 17. That can be found in the top right of the wheels here. It says mid/details. And as a general rule of thumb, think of this as sharpness. We don't want it to be super sharp or else it'll look kind of weird. So we generally just bump it up to 10 and that should be good. And again, I'm clicking and dragging left and right, or you can double click and just type in the value and click somewhere else. Yep, just like that. And that's really it for the saturation and midtone detail node. And with that said, I think we are ready to start a grade. So these are like the housekeeping nodes. These are the things that you do first to make sure your footage, first of all, looks good and matches up to the rest of the footage, right? So I'm gonna hit Control or Alt S, and we have this new node here, and I'm gonna actually drag this down here. And what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna click back on our saturation and midtone detail node. I'm gonna hit Alt S again, and it'll give us another one. And I'm just going to delete. I'm gonna click on this link here. These connections, they're called links. I'm gonna click on this link that links this node 5 to node 6, and I'm just gonna delete it. So it's no longer connected. And I'm gonna drag that down here, right underneath this one. So to get these connected, all you have to do is take the green dot and drag it to the green triangle, and everything's connected again. So what I've done is I've linked two nodes after our saturation and midtone detail node, and we'll see what that does in a moment. So once I've done that, I'm going to take this last link here. I'm going to just delete that for now. So far we have our base going into exposure, going into white balance, going into saturation, and I have two links going out to two other nodes. This first one, I'm going to call our grade, okay? And depending on the project, that might be called just look. It's really a personal preference, but I'm going to just call it a grade. And this other node right below it, I'm going to call it saturation boost. Okay. So now that we have our grade and saturation boost, we need a way to link these to the very end over here. So to do that, I'm going to right click, hover add node, and I'm going to add what's called a parallel mixer. This makes it so you can have two nodes feeding in with two inputs and one output, just like that. And our tree is linked again. So after we go over our initial grade, this is where we can finally start manipulating the color and where we can start finally ignoring the scopes and go off of our eyes here, right? So we can go into our color. Things here, like it looks okay, but it's a little too blue for my opinion. So I can go into the offset, for example, and this, I'm going to just bring it more towards the yellow side. That gives us a little bit more glow. This was a really bad clip to try and do off the bat because of how dark it is. But yeah, this is where we can really start messing with the color, is in the grade node, and we can play around with our wheels here and figure out what each one does. And I highly encourage that everyone who wants to get into this just really put down any project and just mess around with everything and get a feel for what things do. So I'm just going to get just mess with the colors a little. That looks that looks fine to me. And we'll get into like more comprehensive, or not so comprehensive, but a little more detail into it later. So now that we're done with our grade, okay, we can come to our saturation boost. And this is where we can pinpoint certain things in the frame here that we want to be changed, right? So earlier in the saturation, I opted to not saturate it so much, because later in our saturation boost, let me click on this node here, I can actually come to a new tab, and it's going to be curves. Wait, actually, it's going to be a qualifier tab. And what this enables us to do is to pick a very specific color and single it out. And I'm going to click on this magic wand in the top left. It'll show you what exactly we single out here. So I can click around until I get exactly what I want. For example, there, if I click on the blue area, it's only going to select all that dark area. If I click on the fire here, it'll select whatever it can from the fire. I'm gonna just click around until I get good mask. And you could also hold and drag around as well. Okay, so this is a good enough mask for me right now. And I'm going to turn off the magic wand. So I've only selected the fire as much as possible. Again, the way I did that is I came into our qualifier tab right here from our primary wheels. From our wheels here, I'll just go over, click on qualifier, okay? And then I clicked anywhere on the screen. And to really see what is going on, you click on the magic wand and it'll show you what the node sees, okay? And with this, now that I have just that selected in the qualifier, I can come back to our wheels and I can up the saturation. And it'll only up the saturation of whatever is selected by the qualifier. And now, so that enables us to keep the same level of saturation in the whole background and whatever's going on, while putting more emphasis on the fire here, because we don't want everything super saturated. So I'm going to bump that up to around 80. That looks pretty good to me. And I could also manipulate it individually with the wheels themselves. Like I come to gamma here and say I want it to be a purple fire, and I'm going to just bring the gamma all the way to purple, and bam, we have a purple fire. You notice the center of that is still a little reddish orange, but I really am committed to having this be a purple fire. So I'm going to come to our log wheels right here, and under highlights, highlights are mostly the brighter parts of our image. And I'm going to bring that also to the purple area, and that changes what's going on here. And then come to our midtones and do the same thing, and we can see how that changes what's going on here. And now we have this bright purple fire, okay? And that's pretty much an entire node tree that's made. You can just do this and it'd be considered done. If anything, you can click on your parallel mixer here, Alt S, and this would be the film grain node. But in the free version, we don't have access to film grain, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But it's a very minor aspect and it's not too important. So now that we've done everything we wanted to the footage in our color tab, we can come to our edit tab again, and we can see that it changed right in our timeline, and we could play it, and it's playing very slowly, but oh, there it is. Cool. So we've sat through a first sort of color grade. This was more so an introductory to nodes and getting accustomed to what they can do. Does anyone have any questions about this first part before we move on to something to like red footage, right? Does anyone have questions?
So you can copy and paste the nodes, right? So that everything is sped up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let me take all these. Actually, no. So what we can do is right under a preview window here, we can actually go to a new clip and see this one doesn't have any nodes. And I'm going to middle mouse click on the one we just did. Now, obviously they aren't the same clip, but yeah, it copy and pasted every single thing we did to the other one. And we could do the same thing here. I'm gonna scroll wheel click onto this one here, and it adds everything. There's also hotkeys such as, I believe, equal sign. So this one's graded, right? Quote unquote. And if I go to our new clip that is not graded, I can hit the equal sign. Whoops. I mean, I can hit the minus sign. This is awkward. Let me see here. Yeah, here we go. Shift plus equals will apply the grade from the previous one. And just to show this here, this one doesn't have a grade. This one doesn't have a grade. This one does have a grade, and it's 2 clips prior to the third one. So I'm going to hit shift minus, and it should add it 2 clips prior. And we could see all the hotkeys if you go to your color tab up in the top, and we can see the hotkeys up here as well. Okay. Any more questions before?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is it that you use the splitter between the grade and the saturation boost? Why don't you have it go from saturation to grade to saturation to film grain?
Okay. Let me. Get rid of that. Here. So we like to separate it because it is in theory less kind of think of the parallel mixer as a way to comp nodes, to composite the nodes. We can link everything and daisy chain everything into the end here, and it works no problem. But because the saturation boost is something that we want, like that we do in our grade, and we think of it while we're doing our grade, and because we want to boost certain aspects, right? We like to comp the 2 nodes, and the way to do that is with a parallel mixer. So if you don't know what comping is, think about it like if we're in our edit tab here, and I have 2 clips right over one another, and I cut this girl out. Like, imagine if these 2 clips, one of them had the girl and one of them did not have the girl, and I just wanted to cut her out and put her in the background. That'd be what a comp is, more or less, to composite something, right? So the parallel mixer is really just a method so we can composite our grade into one area, as opposed to making it several different steps that DaVinci has to think about, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So relink these. Oops. And there we go. Now she has a pink jacket. And this is a part of like all the stuff that we can do. Like if somebody was wearing a white shirt, or like say I didn't like this yellow jacket that she was wearing, I'm just like, I wish she wore a blue jacket. Yeah, I would come to here, grab this, come to my qualifier, and just get it into an area that gets most of the jacket. This isn't a very good one because it's obviously getting her face. So now we made her a Smurf. But yeah, this is the things that we can do with the qualifier tool. And it's super easy to just get a dropper and highlight specific areas. But if you ever need to, I'm gonna come back into the magic wand view. So say I like, oh, I want the jacket here. What it goes off of is the hue and saturation and luminance. So what color something is, how much of that color it is, and how bright it is. So if I drag this around and I say, oh, I want it to look at these colors right here in the hue at about this saturation, and I want it to only highlight the darker stuff. So I drag it to the darker areas. Now it only goes to the darker areas. So, but if I drag it to the brighter stuff, it'll go to the brighter stuff over here. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So there is one thing I did want to show you guys. So how many of you guys know of it's like a old black and white movie, but for some reason, only the fire was colored. And the way they did that was yeah, it was amazing technology for it to be done through film, but with our technology, we can just do it so easily. So I'm in our grade node, and I'm going to come to our curves. And what these curves are is, of course, you have your regular S curves and color curves here, and you could change up everything in whichever way you want it to. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. Okay. But you also have a bunch of options, such as hue versus hue, and you could see a kind of a graph on the bottom here. So there's a lot of blue in this scene, but if I just want to, I just click on the line, and in this middle value, I just don't want there to be any blue, and it'll just turn all the blue that's in the frame. It'll make it go away, right? Reset. And then we have our hue versus saturation. So this is color versus how much of a color it is, and I can do the same thing. And I'll change it in a slightly different way. Okay. We have our hue versus luminance, which is brightness versus the color, and luminance versus saturation. Let me just double check here. Yeah, this is where we're gonna do our trick here. So I'm gonna just make a couple dots along here, and I want only the fire to be colored. So I'm gonna just figure out where in this little graph the fire is, and then I'm gonna try to make everything else black and white. And the way I do that is you just manipulate it in a certain way, because fire is mostly a light value. So we can take that and oh, see here, I just took this area. This is where all of our saturation is, and I'll just turn that all the way down, and we can manipulate it in a certain way so that only the fire is saturated here. And yeah, I messed around with this sort of concept once after seeing that movie, and I thought it was super interesting, and I figured out this quick way of doing it. So if you ever have something like that, here it is. Oh, I'm gonna bring it down even more. So now only the fire is saturated here, and it's a pretty aggressive curve, but that's what it's doing here, right? So that was just a small little fun thing to do. Okay, so kind of moving on now. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot and boring you guys, so I'm just gonna move on to the red footage. Okay.
You're not boring us.
So our red footage here. So if you're working with our class and stuff, you might be handed some red footage. And what that means is that you have a lot of information to work with. And this is a great thing for colorists. So the first thing to make note of is you come into your tabs here, right underneath where you select the footage, and you click on this first one, and this will give us our camera raw. This is specific to raw type files. Right now we're using the camera metadata, which is the camera settings at the time of being shot. But if I set this to clip, I can go in and I can change the ISO value as, and I can also change everything that I can basically change all the settings on the camera as if I was right there on set with it. So, but generally everything should be relatively good to go right out the gate, apart from a few things. So I'm just changing the ISO, making sure everything looks good on our scopes. It's not clipping in any way, and we can do that because it's a raw file. So I just changed the ISO to 200, and I left everything the same. And I can Alt S, make our first node. This is our wait. Who knows what this node label is?
Base?
Base. Okay. And do we do anything to this?
Nope. That's the
Good. Okay. I'm gonna hit Alt test again
exposure.
and exposure. Someone other than Grant on the next one. Okay, so this is our exposure one. What is the first step I want to do in terms of exposure? Can anyone tell me?
Check your whites.
What do you mean by that?
Do you, oh, exposure isn't the one where you make sure your whites are white and your.
Yeah, no, that's in our next node, in our white balancing node. So this exposure, think brightness.
Yeah, it's you want to bring the level down to your what this it was in between 768 and
0.
640, right? Like that's kind of where you wanted it.
Yeah, we
Your
can we
spot
want to
for
shoot
your
in
eye.
between
Yeah.
this area here. And again, I'm going to come to our offset and just bring everything down. I'm using the scroll wheel here. Everything's hovering 768. Cool. I'm going to come to our lift. I'm going to scroll that down. So everything's at about 0. And then I'm going to look at our preview and get it to a good natural level by eye once it's around here. And it's not where I'd like it to be. So I'm going to come to my log wheels so I can have that more finite control of what's going on. Mess with the highlights, midtones. It doesn't really. And I come to my shadows and again, get it to a natural level. Okay. That looks good in terms of the scopes. I think it looks all right by eye, but we can mess with that a little later. Alt S for a new node, and this is going to be our what node?
White balance.
White balance, yes. So this is the one where we can come to our parade scope, and that'll show us exactly what's going on. It's looking pretty white balanced. If there was anything I could do, what would it be? Guess I could just slightly make it colder, and it's already pretty white balanced out of the gate. Okay. Alt test for our next node, and this is going to be anybody before I just type it. Going once, going twice.
Saturation, Rhenen.
Yes, saturate. Good, very good, Tim. Very good, Tim.
You told me not to say anything.
Saturation, midtone detail.
What
And
did you say, Grant?
He told me not to say anything, so I was keeping shut.
Okay, and okay, Grant. What level do I usually bring saturation up to out the gate just to see what it looks like?
Wait, I'm sorry. I was reading a question. Say that again.
What saturation level do I usually bring it up to just to see what it looks like?
I don't remember. Was it 20?
Well, it's already at 50, so then you go up to 75.
Yes,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
75, just to see what it looks like, and if it looks too much, then I'll bring it down. But 75 is like the ballpark area.
So
And that,
Rhenen, you're looking at one frame of a clip.
yes.
What about how the way things fluctuate? I mean, if the one frame is in a shadow and then it suddenly goes and get a lot more sunlight, does that?
So for this clip in particular, we're already staring at the sun, so we'd be exposing for the sun. But you're absolutely right. What about all the rest of the clip? Well, it varies from colorist to colorist. I just happen to do it on the first frame. But more often than not, I also put it on what's called the hero frame, which is the frame that you really want to look good. But it would be much too meticulous to go over every single frame in an individual clip and coloring for that. So this is to get an overall generalized grade.
Can you do keyframing? So, I mean, if they are outside in the bright sun and they walk into a darker home, can you change it?
Yes, I can.
I
We
don't
can do
use
that with
Chromium.
this one.
Just, I mean, there are times when a shot will start brighter or darker than later. So
Yeah, I get what you mean. Okay,
Yeah.
so we can experiment with keyframing on this one. So after our saturation midtone detail, again, we hover 10. That's about our safe spot because otherwise things will look too sharp and it'll look weird. You can experiment with that on your own time. I'm going to create new node. Okay, link up these two and add a parallel mixer and put these two nodes in here so that we get one output. And I'm going to just connect these. Okay, so we have our tree base going into this, and saturation midtone detail has two of them going out to these two, into a parallel mixer, into this next one. So this one is going to be called our grade. And again, this one's going to be our saturation boost. Just in case we want to highlight any specific colors, for example, like the greens, or we just want to turn down the blues. And this one over here, this one's going to be our mask node. So this is where we can, for example, here we have a person's face, and there's a lot of things that change throughout the shot. So I'm going to go at the very beginning of the frame here. I'm going to have our mask node selected, and this circle icon next to our qualifier here. This is our window tab, and we can select all sorts of different windows here. For faces, I'm going to go ahead and select this one. And I'm going to just come over and I'm going to just make it small, and I'm going to feather it. The red circles are a feathering tool. And I'm also going to, right here, down here where we selected it, these are buttons here. So I can do this and it'll invert it, or I could do this as well and it'll do the whole thing. There we go. So I want it to look like this, and it looks all gray because I have the magic wand on. So I'm going to turn the magic wand off, and I'm going to just use our scroll wheel to zoom in here and really just get that on her face. Okay. And the reason why is because this is our start of the mask, and what we can do is track it onto her face. In the free version of DaVinci, we can do this no problem. It won't watermark it. It's an absolutely free thing to do on DaVinci. So to do that, with the mask node still selected, we're at the beginning of our clip. We're going to go to the tracker tool, which is to the right of the window tool, and hit play. And it'll go through the whole clip and track that mask onto her face for the entire duration. And on the free one, it'll be obstructed if anything is in front of your mask. But But if you pay for the studio version, you can actually mask around things in front. There are ways to go around it in the free version of DaVinci, such as just adding multiple masks, but you then run into the problem of having too much going on in the node tree, and you want to try to keep it as simple as possible. So right here, we have some hair getting in her face, but it's tracking no problem. And we're almost done. She's walking away. Okay, cool. Our mask is now tracked. I know that because I can scrub through and I can see it on her face the entire time. So I'm going to go right here. And with the mask node selected, this means I'm only going to manipulate what's inside that mask. I can come to our wheels again, and I can, for example, the gamma, I'll just scroll wheel up, and suddenly her face is brighter. And we can see that throughout the whole frame if we were to watch this. And we can see that her face is just brighter all around. Pause it. And if I wanted her to have this blue tint over her face for whatever reason, and if you don't want to see the mask, you just click off of the node, go into the grade node. And again, because we've tracked that mask onto her face, just that area is going to be targeted by the mask. And what we can do, let me see here, keyframes. Okay, so now that we have a mask tracked on, we can come to our keyframe tabs. So I was in our scopes, and to the left of that is our keyframe tabs. And this is where we can tell specific nodes what to do. So this one, it is node number 8. And in number 8, I want it to start blue, but about right there, I want it to, I'm going to add what's called a, yeah, okay. Let me start that over. I want it to start blue, and I want it to be pink by the end. Okay, so starting blue, I'm going to come to 8. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to add a dynamic keyframe. And on this dynamic keyframe, I'm going to click it so it's highlighted, and I'm going to turn that purple. That should make it so at the beginning, oh man. Shoot. What did I? Hey, Tim, you know keyframes.
Yep.
Is it a dynamic or a static keyframe that I would do for, because I'm pretty sure the terms are synonymous.
Yeah, sure.
You could have one at the beginning without the second. But it's already there.
So yeah, so dynamic is gonna like ramp up and ramp down depending on like a move. So you use like a dynamic keyframe. If you want, like, instead of like a static's gonna give you like a straight curve or like a straight cut, basically. You do two statics. A dynamic will actually have a curve. So like if you're motioning like a graphic to come in, and instead of it coming in and just stopping right there, you can have it come in and it actually will kind of ramp down and slow in. So that's why I would use dynamic keyframe in Premiere.
Okay. Change to dynamic. Okay. Okay, thank you, Tim.
You see the ramping up and down there, or the
Yes. Okay. So by just right clicking on certain tracks, you can just add in a keyframe. You can start it as a static keyframe, or you can click on it, right click again, and you could change it to a different one. That was that was a part that I'm missing. So think of this in terms of brightness on a face. I'm just using color so we can see it more. But now that I've keyframed it to be blue at the beginning and purple at this next point, we can see that at the beginning of the clip, it is blue. And as we get to that next keyframe, it's going to turn purple. Now, this applies to Grant's question because we can do the same concept, but with luminance or brightness. At the beginning, we can have it be darker, and by the keyframe, it can be brighter, outside to inside, right?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Grant?
Yes.
Cool. I hope that was somewhat intelligible. I haven't done very much with keyframes. The most keyframes I've done is actually in mask tracking. So again, to do that, we go to our window tab, we select one of them, and we put it over our desired area. Then we come to our tracker tab right next to window, and we just hit play and let it track throughout the scene. And if you want to keyframe certain aspects, you can come to our keyframe here to the left of our scopes and come to specific points in our video and right click to add keyframes. Dynamic if you want them to flow in and out, or static if you just want it to pop in and out. Okay. Okay, so this should be everything you guys need to know to get started with color grading in DaVinci. Again, I hope, or not again, but I hope that everyone was able to understand something from this, in the sense of nodes aren't as scary as people might think. The key is just to work in layers and to come up. Well, the most important thing is to come up with your own sort of workflow. This is a guideline, one might say. This is the workflow that I've worked with mostly, the workflow that I've been comfortable with, and has and it's been pretty effective. Depending on what your project needs, the workflow might change. But yeah, start with the base, go into exposure, white balance, saturation, and then we can start giving our footage a grade.
So do you do all your editing within Resolve, or would I be able to edit in Premiere and bring it into Resolve and then
You can 100% edit your project in Premiere or Final Cut and bring that whole timeline to Resolve. The way to do that is by transferring what's called an XML file. And an XML file is just like the metadata that your editing suite tells the footage, so it knows where to be placed, right? So you can have your project in Premiere. You can go to the top right, I believe, and it's in one of the export tabs, and it just says export Final Cut XML. DaVinci accepts XMLs no problem, so that's really the only one you'll ever need. But you can plug that into DaVinci Resolve we can come to our media here. We can come to file, and we can import. And then we can press media from XML, and then we can also let's see here, project metadata. Yeah, you would just bring it in from an XML, and so long as you have all the same footage, same audio, all the stuff that's used, you can drop it in here, and DaVinci will do its best to relocate all of that footage and then implement it into your timeline here. And from there, you should be able to just jump right into color by selecting each scene and color grading each one. And final export will usually be done here in DaVinci.
Including audio, or is it just the video? And
so there are two ways of doing the audio. You can edit it in Premiere or Final Cut.
no, I meant you said the final export, and I'm wondering if the if it's picture locked, and you've done your color correction, I can still do my audio elsewhere, right?
Yes, you can. If it's picture locked, you so what I was getting to is that if you have a picture locked edit here, by the way, Alt and mouse wheel scroll in and out of your timeline. There's no audio here, but so say this is my picture lock cut and I brought in my XML and it put everything here, including the audio. If the audio doesn't match up to how you edited it in your previous suite, what you can do is export your audio separately in your other suite and delete all the audio here in DaVinci and put it so it should line up perfectly since it's the same audio from your picture lock cut, right? And so when you go to deliver, everything should line up no problem. And again, if it doesn't turn out too well here, you have your picture lock cut exported from DaVinci, but the audio is wacky. You can just mute everything and put your picture lock cut over your good audio in your other editing suite as well, if you really wanted to. Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Cool. Well, I had other stuff kind of lined up, but I think I covered I covered everything in terms of the basics here.
What other stuff?
What other stuff? Great question.
I mean, if you're done, that's fine. I'm just like super interested in this. So
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to pretend that I already went through all my nodes and we're on the saturation boost here. Like in this particular shot, I'm just like, oh man, I really wish those greens were popped out. Does anyone know what I would do to get those greens a little more green and in our face?
Use the eyedropper to isolate them and then bump up saturation.
Yeah, exactly. So we would come to our qualifier, exactly, and it automatically gives you our eyedropper. I'm going to click on the magic wand here so I know exactly what we're clicking on. Click. Okay, that's not where I wanted it. So I'm going to click and drag the mouse around so I get mostly this green area. Okay. And I'm going to say I don't want any of that, the orange. I just want as much of this greenish area as possible. I'm going to mess with the saturation, bring it around, play around what works, what really works. It's the key to the qualifier is just to mess with your values and get it to a spot where you really isolate only that. Now, we didn't go through and expose or white balance or any of that stuff on this, so it's a little bit harder to grab it. But now that I have a basic grab of just the greens, I can come to our wheels here and I could just bump the saturation. I'm just like, oh, I want it to be even more green. I'm going to come to my gamma and make it more green. There it is. And then another thing, so we would do this under saturation boost into a mixer so we can essentially comp it all together. But I'm gonna do that here. Delete that. Right click, add node, parallel mixer. Chain these together and bring it to the end. And oh, this one should also have one going into it. It'll be from another node, but so you can stack and daisy chain saturation boosts is what I'm saying. So if I had a third one here, I don't have a third input on my parallel mixer, but I can right click it and add an input onto it. And suddenly I have an extra spot. And I'm going to just add another one. And again, I don't have an input. Well, I'm going to add another one. So you can daisy chain and comp as many nodes as you want into a mixer and have it going to one output. So like, for example, this one, I'm like, oh, I want these orange values here. Use my magic wand. I only want this orange. I want all that light, and I want to change it. I want it to be green light. Okay, cool. Undo our magic wand, and suddenly that street lamp is now green. But wait, all this stuff is still orange. So I'm gonna come to another node that I daisy chained in there. I'm gonna only select that, use our magic wand here. So this is all our ambience here. And I'm gonna just use our offset tool and make that green as well so it fits. Turn off our magic wand. Wow, look at all that. This green light is emitting all that green aura, you know. So the qualifier tool is one of my favorites because it allows us to do very, very specific manipulations. In our last one here, use our magic wand again. I want the background there, and I want that background. Let's see, I want it to be more purple with a little bit of green in it, and turn our magic wand off. Wow, this is just like Blade Runner. Look at this place. But yeah, this is just another example of what you guys can do with the qualifiers. I didn't want you guys to feel caged by only using one saturation boost. This is to show you guys that you can daisy chain and link as many as you really want, depending on what the project needs. Right.
What's like it's I mean, is this a typical number of nodes you usually use, or like what's an extreme example of like what is your high end of nodes in a on a clip?
So most of the, like, in terms of the number of nodes, most of it would be in conjunction with your saturation boost nodes. Because everything else is a one-off, and anything else would be the specific variables that you want to manipulate. And I would say no more than 10 I've used. But then again, I haven't needed to use more than like 8, counting film grain.
Well, now, what about LUTs? Are there any LUT situation in
Ah.
DaVinci Resolve?
Yes. Thank you for asking. I totally forgot about that.
What is a LUT?
Yeah, I was
Rhenen?
gonna say, so we should describe or define what a LUT is.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna just select all these. It's a good example. Add one of these. Okay, so a LUT is what's called a lookup table, and that's essentially a so remember my analogy of like a transparent screen over your footage. A LUT is the same thing, except it has certain colors on it that influences your footage in one way or another. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open my FX tab right here, the Open FX, and I'm going to color space transform. And I'm just drag it to this first node here. And that gives me the ability to change the entire color space to a log format. So I like red log. So now it looks like that. I'm gonna close my thing. So we're just pretending that this footage was shot in red log color space. What that is, it's a more flat profile, which gives you a lot more ability to manipulate the colors in certain ways and softer ways even. But I don't want to go through that. So what I'm going to do is I can actually come to my edit, and I can come to our clip here. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to right click, and that'll bring up this whole menu here, and you can find, where is it? Not click color. maybe it's not in the edit. Come to our media and we can come to our clips here. Okay. I'm going to right click. Okay. And here is where we can apply a LUT to everything within this folder here. So if I hover over LUT, I have a lot of different things I can put over it. Because I put the red log over it, I'm going to put the red log LUT converter over it. It looks way different here, but if I come to our edit tab where I already applied a log look to it, you could see that the LUT brings back all the color I took away because of the preset it has, if that makes sense. Again, pretending that this footage was shot in log and I just want to come to our media and I just want to look at the footage right away and see what it looks like. And then of course you can come to your effects tab here and go to library, and pretty sure you can just find the LUT add-in as well. I honestly haven't messed with LUTs too much. Oh, here's something I can demonstrate as well. So I'm going to close the FX. I'm going to open up the gallery here in the top left. And it says no stills created. What this is used for is for if you want to compare two scenes. So I have this here, and I'm going to right click and hit grab still. That'll add it to this area here, okay? And I'm going to come to our next clip here and say I want to match these two clips here, this one and that one. See, this one's flatter, this one's a little bit more in. So to do that, I'm going to come to the top right of our preview, and this kind of half looking icon, one's darker and one's lighter. I'm going to click on that and it'll bring me to a wiping tool, and I can click and drag. So I'm going to put it somewhere in the middle, and that's when I can go ahead and color match or expose match, color match, however you'd like to match it in side by side, so you can have the same luminance values throughout your film. And again, I would come here and turn that off. I'm gonna come here, right click, grab still. Now I have two different stills. I'm gonna use this one. I'm gonna come to my first clip here. I'm gonna go to the top left of our preview, click on it, and it will bring us this wiping tool. And that enables me to see side by side what things look like and go ahead and balance as needed. One of the tools, one of the many tools that you can do here. You can select different ways to do it with it selected. So this is the wipe one. Alternatively, I can click on the next one. So it's up and down, diagonally. You can click and opacity fade it, I guess. I'm not sure what that one is. A/B, stacks them on top of each other. Picture in picture. Bars, checkers. Yeah, I like the wipe one. And to turn it on and off again, this icon up here, the darker side and lighter side. And this only works if you have stills grabbed. And to get to your stills again, top left, the gallery. Assuming you're working on one monitor. Okay. Let's see, is there anything else that I should mention before I actually wrap this up? Does anyone have any specific questions after all that? Was that a little too much to be said, or do I need to go back and explain anything in more detail?
I think it'll be nice for Tim to talk about how to do it in Premiere now, so that
Yeah.
those who want to try DaVinci, and I think if you've done some editing, it would be really cool. It's a free program, and you can see how powerful it is. But if you want to just do it in Premiere, Tim can give you the basics for that.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you guys did learn something here, and yeah, take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Rhenen.
Great job, Rhenen.
Rhenen.
Excellent work. All
You want to
right.
keep recording you, Tim?
Sure, if people want to see that, that's absolutely fine by me. All right. Okay, let me share my screen. Great job, awesome job, Rhenen.
Thanks. All right. I hope it was helpful.
It was great.
Good info.
I'm going to start with the first and foremost thing, the big takeaway from Rhenen's instruction today was, if I was you, I would make friends with Rhenen. And that way, when I want my project color graded, I could go and say, "Hey, Rhenen, you want to do me a favor? I can slip you $100, or maybe I'll buy you a pizza, a nice slice if you color grade my piece." No. So I'm going to go over the basics of our color correction within Premiere, and essentially there's no nodes. We're not going to talk, there's no nodes here. We're going to talk about like color effects and stuff that we can put on our pieces. And there's a lot of range in the coloring in Premiere that you can definitely do it. Something like Resolve looks basically way more specified for this. Premiere, of course, is a lot of, different type of programs slammed in together. So possibly, maybe it's not going to be as detailed or as complete as what we got with Rhenen. But I'm going to just show you so you could navigate and do a whole bunch of different stuff here within Premiere. So first and foremost, I have my sequence here. Like Rhenen said, you can go in and check out the metadata to see your bit rate and everything. We have all our information. Where's my bit rate here? Well, I would actually go in here and look at my info. Here, this is going to tell me my bit rate. My bit depth. This is giving me all the metadata that was given with this. I know my resolution. I know all of the different information I'm pulling from this. I'm working with some red files right now. Grant, you might recognize this, right? Yes, familiar, Grant? Grant's not talking, but I'm assuming he's saying
just fight scene. The bald guy there, Ralph Torreson.
Mm-hmm.
He just died a couple weeks ago.
Oh no.
He had throat cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, that makes me feel bad for choosing this clip.
No, it's good. We're honoring him with his performance.
So we can see that I just have picked several different scenes. Haven't really edited it together, but I just want to show you the different levels of, I want to turn comparison view off. Okay. So we can see the different levels, and we want to, be able to color this. Now, personally, I hate when Zoom does that. So this is my edit space that I normally work in, right? So this is my preferred setup. So I have my preview, I have my program, I have my media bin over here, which is my project file with all my assets. And most notably, up here in my preview, I also have my effect control. And this is where I can affect anything that's on the timeline here, right? And then what's notable is over here is I have my Lumetri. my Lumetri color, which is how I do all my color correction within my piece. I also have my essential graphics, and then my essential sound I have closed for some reason, which I must have just clicked off of. But normally I have these three up. And this, I just like working with this because I can go through, and I found that for my workflow, I color correct as I go, at least a first pass in order to go ahead and put everything together. And then once I have my basic color correction, I have my picture edit, then I go through and I go and do a detailed matching and everything so that I just finish it. I like to be able to start at a base level and then so I can see what I'm seeing. Just how my workflow, that's my preferred workflow. And you can do it however you might want to do it. Okay, so in Premiere, Rhenen talked about a lot of different stuff. Let's just start with this right here. We'll just start with Alex's face. So I'm just gonna cut my piece, and we're gonna look at the image here. Now, just looking at it, this is red footage, right? So we're gonna have some bit depth. And we could see that there, we want to colorize this so that it seems more dramatic. There's a certain level of light. I can actually see noise already in this section. I'm not sure how it reads over Zoom. We're looking at half quality also, but remember in Premiere, anytime you stop, you get full quality rendered. If you hit play, we're going to see some noise and stuff just because maybe it was under lit or over, maybe they had gain on or something. So let's just go ahead and go into our Lumetri color tab over here. Now, Lumetri is a really easy and functional for any level of color corrector. So let's say we're all basic color corrector. So let's go basic AF, right? Let's go into the basic color correction right here. And then right here, we're going to have just a basic way to look at this. Now, of course, I'm going to click on my color tab, which is how I prefer to work when I am specifically coloring. And what that gives me is we're seeing our scope, right? And so we're clicking on our scope here, and we, instead of seeing the three like Rhenen, we're seeing them all overlaid with one another. And we can actually go in and change. So this is the RGB, so red, green, blue, and white all together as one. But we can actually look at it and see our vector scope as well, which is the circular view. Again, it's going out like here. Let's go ahead. We can then look. I'm just going to show you all of the different options that we can have. There's Parade there. That was kind of what Rhenen was using, where we could see all the different levels there. And again, we can turn all these on or turn all of them off, and you can set a preset. So I'm control clicking here, and the presets, have different way. I just want to look at the histogram, or here's the vector scope. It's basically whatever setup you like. All right, let's go with our 4 scopes right here. Actually, I want, that's what I want. Okay. All right. So when we're looking here, now we're going to look here. We can see all the different levels. We can see where everything is at. And now we can start affecting our image. So right here, we have our white balance. We have our tone. We have our saturation. The first thing I always do too is up my saturation. It's at 100. I love to go all the way to 200 to see what it's like, and then go back from there based off of the space. I usually work with Blackmagic footage, and so I almost always bump it up to 200, and we can always add more saturation. But here, actually, looking at the red, I'm probably going to go about 150, and of course here we can just type in and choose a color amount and be like, okay, that's a good saturation, a base level saturation, like starting there. Now let's look at our exposure. Exposure is the amount of light. Obviously, if we add more or we add less, it's either going to make it darker or lighter, right?
And the only problem is when we make it lighter, it makes everything uniformly lighter, right? So even our dark areas are getting darker. Well, we can work with masks and everything like that. So just know that when you do exposure, it's going to expose everything. Okay, let's just bring it up a little bit to showcase contrast. Now, contrast is the difference between the black and whites. And as you can see, watch the scopes in the right-hand corner here. You can see that the more contrast I add, the farther the color profiles get, and the less contrast, the closer they are. The problem, though, is when you mess with contrast too much, you can end up crushing your blacks and making it look really unnatural if you have super black areas. So this is an area to play around with. Okay, we'll just go base back here. I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Highlights. Now, what are highlights? Highlights are the brighter areas, brighter lighted areas. So I can affect the area that is the bright, the brighter levels of white color, but really it's the light sources. If I bring it all up, look, now we're getting hot spots where it's so, I know bald heads are hard, but it's very shiny. We're seeing it here on the nose until we're starting to lose it. We can also bring that down. Sometimes if your face is overexposed, you can bring the highlights down a little bit and try to recover there. Shadows, again, the shadows are their darker areas. Do we want to see more or less of this area? Again, everything we're doing is uniform. So I'm just showing you that we're affecting everything that's in this image. Whites level, anything that's white, we can boost or reduce. So again, if I crank it all the way up, it's adding all of the whites everywhere is going to go up. I'm going to bring my whites down, and then my black level. This is where we're talking about crushing it, right? That's a crush, that's crushed blacks. Oh, why did it do that? Oh, there we go. It's probably, there we go. Just big files. So you can see, like, I mean, if you're making something super stylized, maybe you would do that, but we can't even see his face. Like this would be for what, like 300 or something. So there is a certain level that you can mess with depending on how dark you want it to look. Right.
So are you trying to get that background completely black without any grain?
Well, we can get there. There's definitely somewhere there. I'm just messing around showcasing what all of these are doing right now. Okay, so now we've talked about like our tone and controlling it here within the basic corrector. I mean, you can see the more Grayson, you're right. Like the more black I mess with it, the less I'm likely to see the noise, right? Because I am actually crushing this black area and the noise is going away. The only problem is I still want like to expose for his face. So if we hit play, let's see if it's going to play for me. All right, come on, buddy. Go to 8th and see if that doesn't. We can still see there's noise happening on his face. So it's not like we're hiding the noise. We might actually, with this clip, they're always going to have to live with it or minimize it as much as possible. Okay. The other thing to note is our white balance here. White balance, of course, is important when we're changing shots and changing lights. What is most likely the case is we're all in one situation. Maybe we filmed all over the span of a day. A film set like this, odds are this, I don't remember. This is probably a day shoot, right, Grant?
Yeah.
A day shoot. So the odds of someone changing the white balance on the camera, the odds of using different lighting sources are unlikely. That's why we white balance our cameras, right? We want everything to be white balanced correctly. Now, what's interesting too is, let's say we had someone film the color board that is a good reference that professional productions do. There's a board, maybe we've seen it before, but it's a board you can put up on the in front of your camera and it kind of gets the base level of based under these lighting, this is what all these colors look like. And then you can use that to white balance. And what's great is like we have the eyedropper tool, and let's say, okay, unfortunately Alex is wearing a white shirt right here. So let's go and find a uniform level. Like obviously I'm not going to pick a crease right here where it's black, right? I'm going to try to find what I think is like the most evenly lit white area. Let's just color pick that. And you can already see, I don't know if it translated here, but the white level actually really changed to the color temperature. And we can see that using the white, the eyedropper, and look, I can eyedrop anywhere, right? I'm actually clicking and dragging, and you can see he's based off of where I'm going, it's changing my white balance. So realistically, I'm going to spin it a little bit in this white area and find what I think is the rightest white balance. And again, I'm also looking in the lower right hand corner, my parade levels, to see the black, the red, the green, and the blue all to be in sync to get that white balance. So I'm just gonna go, that's about right. And you can see like our temperature and our tint gets affected that way. And again, if I want to do it by eye, or I want to like make everything cooler, I could just bring everything down, and we're going to see definitely more blue than green. And then we can go and, you know, find, okay, look, now we're doing purple. Yeah, we can definitely do Blade Runner, right? But ideally, if we're going to go perfectly balanced lighting, we're going to use our you know, our vectors and our scopes over here in order to determine, you know, uniformity there. All right. Now, this is the basic controller. What's also interesting is you can choose your perfect frame, your hero frame. And let's say you didn't want to do any of this manually. There's an auto button right here. So I'm going to reset everything. I have my white balance. I have my saturation where I want it. I'm going to say auto. Let's see what happens. Okay. Horrible, right? Looks way worse than what I did. Now, sometimes if you're working with a properly lit, we can definitely see all the noise, right? It's because it's just naturally going to bring up our exposure. I've found that like, unless it's properly lit, you know, for flat lighting, this auto feature doesn't work. I'll use it like sometimes as a base, just to go like, okay, let's see what auto gives me. And then I'll bring my exposure down and I'll up my contrast, and I'll be like, okay, interesting what it did with the shadows, and like with the blacks and the whites. But you can totally change all of this here after you do auto. And then if you hate all of it, you reset it again. And again, everything is determined by your, everything's determined by your, you can like undo and redo stuff is what I'm trying to say. Now, this isn't basic, but then we can go down here to creative, and creative allows us to actually adjust different, we'll get to that in a second, different feelings. Do we want to make it feel more like a faded film? Intensity is kind of like the a level of look. You can see that as we up our intensity, it just sharpens everything a little bit as far as the color scope goes. Sharpen, I just said sharpen because I read it. Sharpen is actually a focus fixing tool. And what sharpen, you can take something that maybe a soft focus and make it a little bit in focus. Now, digital sharpening is not a fix all. It is a last case scenario. And you can see as I sharpen it, it basically makes all the pores look. All right, let's go full. All right. So I went full sharpen there. Let me just pull that out. Definitely looks way more like, you know, a scanner darkly starting to go on there. This is something you can mess with. Realistically, if I ever make something, I shoot something a little soft, The most I will sharpen is maybe like 10 to 20. I'll never go beyond 20 because anything that is in focus just ends up looking way more nuts. Vibrance is the vibrance level of the color, the coloring. As you can see, if we bring the vibrance all the way down, we're getting a not true black and white. We actually can see there's some tone here, color tone in his face still, and we bring it all the way up, and it kind of like enhances our saturation, but enhances even our black level as well. And then we have an additional saturation. Now remember, we have 150 saturation there. I can actually continue to oversaturate. Now we got Oompa Loompa levels of skin tone right there. So you can see that messing with this stuff, we can actually continue to up the level. Maybe you're working with a music video and want to make it look super, super poppy. Tint again, also tint refers back up into the other area. We were messing with our white balance and tint. If we go with our tint levels here, our tint balance is actually pretty good, but we can actually go and take our shadow levels, and let's see what happens if I go extreme. You can see all of the dark areas now have become yellow, and our highlight tint, which again is all of our white areas, we'll make that blue just as an accent. So you can see, you can actually color correct specifically the tint and the shadow. So blue and yellow make what color? Purple, mauve, whatever's going on here. Gross anyway. So you can control that. Now that is creative. Now we have curves. Curves is the one that I use a lot. RGB curves here is like what Rhenen was showing us. So from here, I can actually, this is more so where I'm going, instead of using the exposure, which ups everything, I'm going to use my white curve in order to add more light if I wanted to make things brighter. Now what's interesting, instead of like doing a straight all the way up level, I'm able here to use this curve, and I can make an S curve. I can make any type of curve. Basically anywhere that I click on here, I make a keyframe or a pinpoint. So I can actually go and look at my curve and be like, okay, I'm going to crush this level of okay, so you can see if I go down and make it darker, if I go up, I can bring up certain levels of white areas here. And you can see if I go all the way there, this is bringing everything up. I'm solarizing everything at this point.
Deep frying.
What'd you say?
You're deep frying it.
Yeah, there you go. So you can see actually with the curve, I can bring it up, and I can kind of keep, instead of bringing up all the blacks here as well, I'm bringing everything up. And specifically, I can click down over here now and bring, okay, this is going to control my lower levels of my curve. And I'm going to actually want to brighten up my highlights more so over here. And you can see now I'm like, there you go. Now I've really made something crazy, but more so you can actually go in and add as many pinpoints here to, really start fine tuning what you want highlighted or not, or how much level you can go through. This is all an art in itself. And we're just messing with the whites at this point. Because we're working in RGB, red, green, and blue, I can also go here and click right here and get into my reds and bring up my red tone. And that's specifically, I bring it down, of course. And you can see now this is where we can like fine tune our color balance. Specifically, okay, I want my red to be, I want my red to be right about there. I'll go to my green. I want my green level to kind of match right there. And now my blue, oh, I gotta click blue over here. And blue is almost already there, but I'm gonna maybe make it, okay. There we go. Now just looking at my scope over here, I'm way more happy looking at my color balances here, my color curves. Hue and saturation curves. Okay, color wheel and matches. Okay, So we can go into comparison view here. And in comparison view, we can actually adjust and see like the original versus what we're changing, right? So let me do this. Face detection, apply match. So we're gonna, it's stylized to know that there is a face. Now we're gonna go to our midtones here, and let's make our midtones blue. It's affecting everything in our image. Okay. Okay. So I know what I'm doing wrong here. My comparison view is what I would do is I checkerboard this, and it would allow me to compare. You know, like if I had two separate shots here, I could go through and line up my two different shots to match my color balance perfectly. This is in comparison view. Also, if you want to do this at any point, you don't have to do it here specifically. You can do, it's this icon right here on your program. You can do this at any point in your program. Again, that's going to scrub us through that individual clip. We can click here, and this side is going to be, of course, where our cursor bar is. So we can find that. And now we want to go here to find the other reference. Okay. And then, you know, we can turn that on and off. We can also do our comparison again, like just like Rhenen's, you can scrub up and scrub down. You can scrub, or we can look at it this way, both different frames. All right. Okay. Color wheels right here. Yes, we can apply to our shadows, our midtones, our highlights. These are all just basically different ways to do the same level of things here in Premiere. HLN secondary. Now, this is basically similar to what Rhenen was doing as far as like picking a color. So I'm going to choose right there. I can set my color, and now I'm able to go ahead and choose. Let's see. So here. Let me just go. Sorry, let me get out of comparison view. Okay. You can see as I scrub, it's actually going to highlight a lot of the area that I'm going to pick. So I'm actually going to pick here, which is going to encompass a lot of his shirt. And this will allow me to go ahead. As you can see, I'm now affecting pretty much everywhere else but the area I've selected, created a mask. And then we're going to change the temperature. Let's do that. Let's tint. You can see our contrast is happening here in the areas we've selected. This is all, again, an area. We're making something super horrendous. The other thing to note here is denoise. And you can see we can try to go through and get rid of some of the noise there. Again, this is not something I mess with as much as possible. We're seeing a lot of where the noise is. And the less we pull out, it's going to try to fill in. But ultimately, maybe someone knows better than I do. I don't personally enjoy using this feature here. I use a secondary or a third-party program to help denoise my stuff. Now, blur is interesting because it takes the color that we've selected and it's gonna like blur so it's not so dramatic, these changes that we're making using the HSL secondary color keying. This will allow you to take like a color and switch it within Premiere. All right, and vignette. A vignette, of course, is a feature to make it look more. This is a bad one to vignette. Let's go right here. Let's just show. I'm going to bring my exposure up to show the vignette. All right, a vignette, the more or less you can see, basically it's making it look like an older, you can make it look like an old TV or an old film. Yeah, there you go, film, that's it. Okay, now what's interesting too is like, let's say we've messed a ton with this one and I'm like, well, there's a bust with HLS. Right here, we can toggle on and off any of these features. So we could actually get rid of a lot of the stuff where we went crazy and go back to just the basic. What's also super interesting about everything that we do over here will translate over here into our effect panel. And we can see Lumetri color now becomes something here. And in Lumetri color, we can see like, oh, here's our basic. And we can actually go through and keyframe everything here within our shot. So maybe just like what Rhenen was showing us with the map, let's say I want to make a mask and I just want it to affect his face. I'm just going to draw a quick mask. Obviously, anybody who's worked with masking knows that like it is way more time consuming than this basic mask that I made. Okay, and you can see, we can see that like, look, only his facial area now is affected here. And in fact, let's turn back on that. Okay, so now look, we've got, and let's click off of our mask. There we go. So now when we hit play, of course, our mask is just going to be there, right? Just like, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Now I missed. Okay, so just like that, let's say that that's my perfect mask. Just like this, and just like in Resolve, I can actually track this mask. So it's going to find kind of his eyes and his nose. And if I hit track right here, it is going to spend a little bit of time and actually go through and automate keyframing for me. Now, the big difference though is, you know, based off the shot and the movements that I picked, I'm just going to have to go through and clean up the keyframes. As you can see, instantly right here, we have a ton of keyframes that have populated here on our mask path. And as we scrub through, we can see that like, okay, it finds his face and then going forward, okay, it does okay, it kind of follows, but once he turns his face into a profile, it's not super great. But basically it fills in a lot of keyframing for us. And then basically I can go through and go frame by frame, be like, okay, it gets really bad right there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my mask and then I'm going to be like, okay, I'll just go back over there. And now, oh, I'm going to pull it back over here. And then I would go, and this is why masking is so time consuming. I'm going to go through and fix my areas that aren't perfect. Again, this is what we would bright it. We wouldn't just try to make him look as insane as possible.
How do you feather the edges?
Feather it. Yeah, great question. Mask feather right here. Let me just make it bigger so you can see. Again, I can feather my mask and you can see once I click off of it, it's blended more, right? I was like kind of like at 10. So that's why we could see all of these lines. And the more we feather the edges, it basically blurs our mask right there. But then we have to be like, okay, it's kind of bleeding on his neck. So do I go through and do I change my masks keyframes here? There's also like an opacity level. We can basically, how intense do we want our mask to be? Like that's full opacity, but maybe I want to bring it down and kind of just make it more subtle there. As you can see, little, so that's kind of where we can work here. Again, we can actually keyframe any of these things. So if we want, so like we have a light change, we want to keyframe exposure, we want to keyframe anything within a single shot. We can mess with our Lumetri color here. It's basic here as far as like putting the first steps on there, and then I go into here to affect actual areas within our piece. The other stuff to know is, well, what if I want to, what if I just want like what Rhenen was doing? Basically, I'm doing everything within one layer. So if I turn off this one layer, it affects everything. But what if I wanted to be like Rhenen and do, first I want to do exposure. Secondly, I want to do, what was number 2?
White balance.
Exposure, white balance. Yeah, what if I want to do white balance? Well, what's super interesting too is just like copying and pasting, I can add as many of these Lumetri colors, right? And as of right now, it's doubling everything, but I can click in here and reset everything as well. So I can make everything go base, or what's even easier is instead of copying and pasting my effect right here, which already has all my changes, I'm going to go into my effects window here. I can just type Lumetri, L-U-M-E-T-R-I, well, it's going to be here if I scroll down. So it's a lot of bunch of LUTs. Lumetri color right here. I can add another base one, and then going from here, I can be like, okay, let's make this one my white balance one, and so on and so forth. We can see actually there's a lot of video effects in here that are beyond Lumetri. Lumetri is like the integrated one that kind of has everything there. It's but if you want to go through and specifically just do color balance, just do tint, just do image controls, black and white, keying, of course, our color, if we're working with green screen or we want to key out a color, noise and grain, we can add scratches, we can try to remove some scratches here. Obsolete is like old versions. Perspective is going to be like a drop shadow. This is going to be basic 3D, more so for text. Stylized, you can actually add, all right, let's mosaic him. Oh, cool. All right, well, we can, add special effects. Are we going to solarize him? Oh, there we go. Took a second to kick in. There's our solarize. Yeah, he's in sunshine right now. There's the ton of effects to play with. Transform is going to be, we can control the image that way. I'm getting into effects, but basically there are there's many different types of color. Color correction in here that we can mess with. And as you can see, if you don't like Lumetri, let's just turn those all off. If you don't like Lumetri, we can just do color and brightness. Now this gives us, we can bring our brightness up. No, that's going to affect everything, right? But it might be good if I mask, like, okay, I just want his nose to be bright. So there we go. I can just let's feather that a little bit. Mask expansion will allow how much more of the mask will come in or come out. And then we can just, do that. And so now I could keyframe that and he's going to have, the Rudolph nose or whatever. We could do that. With change color here is another feature where you can actually choose a color. And we are going to change the hue of just that color right there. I'm working with the super white area. So you can see now I've changed my color. So it's going to affect everything that's within that area. All right. Feel like I've been talking forever myself. Any questions or comments you want me to specifically go in? I mean, this is a 1,000-mile view of all of this stuff. There's essentially like what I would like everyone to do is jump in, choose something to color correct and play with, to mess with this area. And the things to know, Lumetri color, of course, is going to be probably your workhorse when you're color correcting. Comparison view, again, is going to be great between separate shots. And we're going to be able to choose, like, this is what I want every shot to look like. I use this to go through, and then I can go through and choose to try to match the black levels on everything that I'm happy with there. And then again, for me, this is a big thing. I do basic color correction, and more so than anything, this is kind of the workflow that I work with. I'm going to go and find.
So Tim, one of the things that I think you should talk about is, so you're not going to color correct every single shot. So if you're cutting and you've already done your basic edit, but you've used the same shot, or a couple of shots that are the same light and color, you can copy and paste that onto each one, so that it saves you a ton of time, right?
Absolutely. Took the words right out of my mouth, Grant. I was just about to say that. So basically what I would do is I would go and say, like, okay, Alex's character, I have him, we have our setups. I'm going to, every instance I cut back to his close up or even his wide shot, most likely we changed our angles and fixed our lighting a little bit, but everything's going to be probably the same. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do my basic, I'm going to saturate him. I'm going to bring my curves up. All right. I'm going to go here. I'm going to bring my blacks down a little bit. I'm going to, fix my color temperature. I'm just eyeballing this all right. All right. This with our whites, bring that down a little bit. Okay, so let's just say I'm happy with this. This is the coloring I want. What I would do is then go over to my effects panel over here, copy my Lumetri color effect, then go to every other instance. Let's pretend these are a bunch of different shots of Alex, but basically I copy and I paste. And you can see we can go to every single clip and copy and paste our initial coloring. Maybe everything's white balanced, right? Maybe I'm just going to put all the white balances, but you can see it doesn't, like if I just went and blanketly put it on every single shot. Oh, this one's already got a vignette or something on it. Okay, yeah, let's get rid of that. Okay, so I just blanketly took the first one and put it on everything else. Obviously, it doesn't work on this one at all, but it gives me a base level to work with. And so like, I'll put it on here. I'm like, okay, this is somewhere to start with. And then I basically like to bring up my saturation. I like to bring up my levels a little bit on all my shots. Then I'll go through, I'll refine my edits. I will get a picture lock. And then that's when I'll go and fine tune every single thing, because there's no point in color correcting everything if like you're going to cut a whole section or anything. That's just a big waste of time. And that's why the colorist is always the last person within the workflow, because you get picture lock, you get sound lock, you get everything. And then it's time to colorize, because it is not only a key process, but it's a time consuming process that is very tedious. And you're sitting there matching colors and go referencing everything and looking at your scopes and everything.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I did the On the Couch project, edited that, all of us or several GAV students and faculty worked on together. And I color corrected as we went. And then ultimately I gave it to Rhenen and his company to color correct, and they deleted everything that I had done. So really, all of it was a waste of time. It was for me so I could feel good when I was watching it, but really, ultimately, they took everything back to raw data and started over again.
Yeah, and yeah, for me, for my workflow, I just like it because it's a point of reference for me to like look at everything. And specifically, the only time that I absolutely recommend like doing that first is when you're working with green screen. Because if you go through and affect your coloring after you've done your green screen, it's going to change your green's value and your background's going to get all messed up. Wouldn't you agree, Rhenen? Yeah, he's saying yeah. Yes, so that I work with a lot of green screen at my day job. And so that is the one area where I will spend the time and get everything happy, because nothing's worse than, you know, finishing a project and being like, oh, all my green screen stuff is slightly messed up. So that I then use that as my point of reference to, you know, colorize everything when I'm done.
Are we done? Should I stop the recording?
I think so, unless there's any more questions or comments.
Really quick, you said things about noise reduction done in Premiere. Unfortunately, when it comes to DaVinci, noise reduction is something you only get with the studio version.
Yeah, it's yeah, well, and it's premium in
Yeah.
Premiere you're paying for anyway. And I don't even really like the noise reduction aspects in Premiere. I always use a well, I pull in a third-party patch. The only other thing that I didn't show, let me just share my screen one last time. If you are a LUT user, there is right here an option to bring in your own custom LUT. I know some people even will buy LUTs. Like, let's say I want to like do the Snyder cut version of my video, excuse me, my video, and you can buy LUTs if you, and so basically LUTs will give your film a tone. As you can see, okay, this is let's go back with italics. All right. All right, I'm going to click here. You can see just by going through and looking at the different options, there's some that are built specifically for different cameras, but I'm applying, you can see the different color tones just right here. Now this is, these are color profiles for different cameras here in the basic correction, but in creative, is it creative? Yes, our looks right here, which are LUTs, will give us much more. You can see it's like clean Kodak. It is gold orange. This is iron. So you can actually tone pretty much what I would do, and I'm sure maybe Rhenen, you think about this as well. If I'm going to do a tone over my whole piece, I'm going to color everything basically neutral. And then once I'm done, I'm going to apply the LUT to everything like as a finished piece, unless there's like a specific area that needs you know, finesse or anything. And basically we know that in Premiere, once you're done, let's say this is my picture lock, I can select everything in Premiere and I can do a nest. When I nest all my video, it becomes basically one clip, basically a subsequence, which then is my whole clip here. And then I can click on here and go into Lumetri and then be like, okay, everything I want to be noir. And now, you know, pretty easy to get some, you know, film noir looking footage here right away, assuming that everything had been color corrected and properly in the start. We can just see that applying it generally to all over here doesn't work because you know, this shot is extremely dark compared to you know, these later on shots.
That's the other thing I wanted to mention about the DaVinci workflow is that you can basically copy and paste all your nodes, and the only thing you will have to change is the exposure and white balance, just so the grade you do looks the same. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.